Bills Mafia, hold on tight because the offseason moves keep coming in Orchard Park, and one of the conversations happening right now around this roster is one that most Bills fans never expected to be having about a player who has become one of the most beloved and recognizable faces of this entire franchise era. We will get to the Dion Dawkins discussion in a moment because it deserves full and honest treatment. But let us start with the addition that just got made, because the signing of Deven Thompkins tells you something important about how this coaching staff and front office are thinking about the receiver room heading into training camp. And there are two veteran positions that are suddenly looking much less secure than they did 3 months ago. Start with Tomkins because the name is unfamiliar to most Bills fans, but the player himself has a story worth understanding before you dismiss him as just another depth piece. Tomkins arrives in Buffalo as a 4-year NFL veteran who has bounced between 4 different organizations: the Buccaneers, the Panthers, the Falcons, and now the Bills, without ever finding a stable home or a consistent role. In his NFL career, he has 36 game appearances, 2 starts, 29 receptions for 162 yards, and 1 touchdown. Those are not the numbers that generate headlines, but context matters enormously when you are evaluating a player at this roster level. And the context around Tomkins makes him considerably more interesting than his raw statistics suggest. When Tomkins arrived at Tampa Bay Buccaneers training camp as an undrafted free agent from Utah State in 2022, Todd Bowles came out of a practice session and publicly called him out by name in a press conference. He said Tomkins was agile, quick, and explosive on the ball, and specifically said he had been making good receptions and that he was going to keep an eye on him. That is not something head coaches do casually for undrafted players who are not standing out in meaningful ways. Bowles was a Super Bowl winning defensive mind who had seen thousands of NFL players in his career and who did not hand out public praise as a motivational tool. He said it because Tomkins was doing something that caught his attention. The college resume also shows a player with legitimate production. At Utah State, Tomkins accumulated 71 receptions, over 2,500 yards, and 15 touchdowns. His return average was nearly 25 yards per attempt in college, which is the kind of explosiveness in open space that special teams coordinators specifically seek out when they are building coverage units and return operations. In his most recent NFL stint with the Falcons in 2025, he played in 7 games and contributed primarily on special teams, which is the path most receivers of his profile take to earning roster spots and eventually working their way into the offensive rotation. Here is the specific opportunity that exists for Tomkins in Buffalo. The Bills have Ray Davis as their primary return man, and Davis was exceptional in that role last season, averaging over 30 yards per return and earning All-Pro recognition. But the receiver competition at the bottom of the depth chart is genuinely unsettled, and the minicamp play that drew the most attention featuring Tomkins was a long touchdown reception from Shane Buechele in a passing drill where he got open deep and extended to complete the catch. That is exactly the kind of play that gets people talking. It is exactly the kind of play that makes a coaching staff wonder whether there is more there than the resume suggests. Joe Brady's offense has historically found ways to deploy weapons at the margin of rosters, players with specific tools who fit specific situations within the scheme. If Tomkins can show that explosiveness consistently when the pads come on in training camp, he has a legitimate path to making this 53-man roster. But Tomkins' arrival also creates pressure on the players already in that receiver room. And 2 veterans in particular are heading into training camp with more roster insecurity than their performance history alone would create. The first is Mitch Wishnowsky at punter. The salary cap reality of professional football in 2026 means that every line on the budget gets scrutinized against the production being delivered and the cost of finding a replacement who could deliver similar results at a lower price point. Wishnowsky has been a reliable and experienced punter for the Bills, the kind of player who handles extreme weather conditions in Orchard Park with the comfort that comes from years of operating in that specific environment. But younger specialists entering the league consistently push the market in a direction that makes experienced veterans at certain specialized positions more difficult to justify on a championship-level cap. Brandon Beane has never been shy about making the mathematically sound decision, even when it creates an uncomfortable outcome. If a younger punter enters training camp and demonstrates the ability to match Wishnowsky's production at a fraction of the cost, the conversation about the punter spot becomes genuinely competitive rather than perfunctory. The second and more impactful situation involves Ty Johnson, the backup running back who has become one of the more quietly valuable pieces of Josh Allen's offense. Johnson accumulated over 450 total yards last season as the primary complement to James Cook, contributing as a pass catcher out of the backfield, a reliable protection option on passing downs, and an efficient ball carrier when given opportunities as a change of pace back. Those contributions represent real and meaningful value in the specific way the Bills use the running back position. Cook is the workhorse and the featured weapon. Johnson is the player who keeps defenses from being able to substitute into obvious run or pass personnel and who keeps Allen comfortable behind an honest two-back backfield. The cap pressure on Johnson is real, with Cook's contract occupying significant dollars at the position and with younger players looking for opportunities to earn roster spots at the running back depth chart. The front office has to weigh whether Johnson's proven value justifies his price tag relative to what a cheaper developmental option might provide. This is the cruelest category of roster decision in professional football. A player who has done nothing wrong, who has performed at a high level, who has earned his paycheck, and then some, being evaluated for a potential release simply because the economics of the situation might favor a cheaper alternative. Johnson has not lost a step. He has not created problems. He has simply been good at his job in an environment where being good at your job at a certain price point is not always sufficient for survival. Now let us get into the conversation that is going to generate the most discussion among the Bills Mafia, because this is the one that touches the emotional nerve that franchise-beloved players always touch when their future is uncertain. Should the Buffalo Bills consider trading Dion Dawkins? And before half the fan base immediately dismisses that question as heresy, let us actually engage with the argument being made and evaluate it honestly, because the football and financial realities here are more complicated than the emotional response to his name would suggest. Dawkins is 32 years old. He has been to 5 Pro Bowls. He has been one of the most important left tackles the Bills have had in the modern era of this franchise, the blindside protector for Josh Allen throughout Allen's development from raw talent into the best quarterback in the NFL. He is a locker room leader, a charismatic presence, a player who publicly called out his desire to have Stephon Diggs return to Buffalo on social media, and who understands his role in the culture of this team as something that extends beyond his individual performance on game days. He is deeply beloved by the fan base in a way that very few players who are not Josh Allen are beloved. All of that is true, and also true is that Dawkins carries a cap hit of approximately $24.8 million against the salary cap in 2026, rising to approximately $25 million in 2027. And the performance data from last season raised legitimate questions about whether that cap number reflects the player the Bills are getting. After allowing only 9 sacks in the previous 3 seasons combined, Dawkins allowed 7 sacks last year alone. His pass protection grades declined. His penalty numbers were up with 10 infractions, including false starts and holding calls. His pressure rates were the worst of his career. Now, those numbers deserve important context before anyone draws conclusions. Dawkins dealt with a foot injury last season that affected his movement and his ability to generate the kind of leverage and footwork that makes a pass protector elite. A left tackle operating at less than full physical capacity is going to show performance decline in the statistical categories that measure pass protection quality. The question that training camp will answer is whether Dawkins returns to full health and demonstrates that last season's decline was circumstantial rather than structural. If he comes into camp healthy and moving well, the production should return to something closer to his historical norm. But the cap reality does not change regardless of how he performs. The Bills have real financial constraints created by the accumulation of significant contracts across multiple positions. DJ Moore's contract, Ed Oliver's deal, Cook's extension, Allen's massive contract at the top of the ledger. Every dollar committed to Dawkins at $24.8 million is a dollar unavailable for addressing other needs. And with a young left tackle in Jude Bowry, who spent the entire offseason working with the first team while Dawkins missed time, the Bills now have information about the backup option that they did not have at this time last year. If Bowry shows genuine readiness in training camp and preseason games, the theoretical possibility of trading Dawkins while he still has meaningful market value becomes at least worth having the internal conversation about. To be completely clear, trading Dion Dawkins before the 2026 regular season would be an enormous risk for a franchise whose top priority is winning a Super Bowl right now. Allen needs protection. The offensive line needs continuity and leadership. Replacing an experienced, well-compensated left tackle with a fourth-round rookie and some developmental depth pieces is not the kind of swap that makes a good team better. It is the kind of swap that might make a team younger and more financially flexible at the cost of competitive readiness in the near term, but the conversation being had is not necessarily about trading Dawkins before the season starts. It is about whether the organization uses training camp and the preseason to gather enough information about their young tackle options that they feel comfortable exploring trade possibilities before the trade deadline if the season is going well and they can get fair value in return. Trading a veteran left tackle to a team that needs blindside protection at the October deadline in exchange for a defensive piece or draft capital while keeping the young options at tackle is a different and more palatable strategic move than cutting ties before anyone has seen what the replacements can do in real game action. The Bills are a team with an open and urgent Super Bowl window. Everything they do between now and week 1 of the regular season and throughout the season itself should be evaluated through that lens. Dawkins contributes to that window as a player and as a leader and as a culture anchor. The question of whether his contract eventually becomes a constraint on flexibility as the window reaches its peak years is legitimate and worth honest internal examination. But the Bills and Bills Mafia are not at the point of closing that door yet. The Hitman Watch in Minnesota has its parallel here in Orchard Park with a different player whose future is uncertain but whose value to the franchise is deeply felt. Bills Mafia, let us hear your most honest takes right now. Can Deven Thompkins beat the odds, outperform the competition in training camp, and earn a legitimate spot on this 53-man roster? Does Ty Johnson deserve to stay in Buffalo despite the financial pressure building around his roster spot? And the big one, would you ever consider trading Dion Dawkins to free up cap space and bet on the young tackles to step up? Drop everything you have got in the comment section right now. Hit that like button and subscribe to the channel because training camp decisions are coming fast and we are going to be right here for every single one of them. Let's go Buffalo.